The auditorium lights shimmered across the massive dome of the Faith and Freedom Conference, the annual gathering that mixed politics, spirituality, and a spectacle of personalities who rarely shared the same stage. People had lined up for hours, some out of devotion, some out of curiosity, and many out of the infectious thrill that came with unpredictability. Tonight, however, the crowd buzzed with a special kind of electricity, because two names on the program should never, under normal circumstances, have been placed together: John Kennedy, the sharp-tongued, quick-witted senator known for his unfiltered remarks, and Joyce Meyer, a globally recognized Christian speaker whose influence reached millions. Nobody could quite guess how they'd interact. One represented unrestrained political grit, the other embodied religious authority shaped by decades of teaching. When the organizers announced they would share the stage for a faith and accountability dialogue, half the audience gasped and the other half grinned like they'd been handed front row seats to a fireworks show. John Kennedy stood at the podium first, leaning casually with the ease of someone who thought best while appearing least worried. Well, he began in his Louisiana drawl, "I reckon we're all here tonight because someone told y'all this would be interesting. I hope to justify the marketing." The crowd laughed, and the senator continued, weaving humor through humility as he thanked the hosts. Despite his reputation for stinging political commentary, his tone today was unexpectedly measured, almost gentle. But the real tension lived in the air behind him, where Joyce Meyer waited offstage, arms folded tightly. Joyce had been briefed on Senator Kennedy's style: witty, blunt, occasionally mischievous. She understood his popularity and his criticisms. But this was her arena: faith, truth, spiritual responsibility. She didn't intend to let political rhetoric overshadow what she'd built her entire life on. When Kennedy wrapped his opener and invited her out, the applause rose in respectful waves. Joyce emerged in a vibrant purple blazer, her expression composed but unmistakably firm. She walked straight to her seat, nodded at the senator, and then leaned toward her microphone. "Thank you, Senator," she said. "You certainly have a way with words." Something in her tone carried an edge, polite, but with the unmistakable suggestion that she intended to control the tone from here. Kennedy smiled. "Ma'am, I've been accused of worse." More laughter rippled across the hall, but Joyce didn't laugh. Instead, she straightened her papers and spoke with the commanding precision of someone accustomed to delivering powerful messages. "Tonight," she announced, "we're talking about accountability, specifically, the responsibility public leaders have in shaping moral culture." Kennedy nodded politely, but Joyce continued before he could reply. "And I must say, Senator Kennedy, there are times I've listened to your interviews and wondered if you realize how many people you influence. People don't just hear your jokes, they take them as truth. Sometimes humor is used to hide, deflect, or even silence important conversations." The room tightened like a rope pulled at both ends. Several audience members shifted, expecting fireworks sooner than planned. Kennedy's eyebrows lifted slightly. He hadn't expected her to confront him so directly, and definitely not within the first 2 minutes. "Ms. Meyer," he drawled, "if you're suggesting that my comments silence anybody, I assure you I've never been successful at quieting even my dog." Some laughter broke the tension, but Joyce didn't budge. "Humor," she said firmly, "can distract people from the truth. And sometimes the truth needs clarity, not comedy. Would you agree?" A hush fell. Joyce Meyer had effectively cornered the senator in front of thousands. Kennedy didn't respond immediately. He leaned forward, interlocking his fingers, evaluating whether he'd just been accused of undermining spiritual truth. "Well," he finally said, "that depends. Sometimes the truth needs a little humor so people can swallow it without choking." Joyce's lips tightened. She seized the moment. "Or," she countered, "humor becomes a shield that prevents accountability. And accountability, Senator, is what I hope we don't avoid tonight." A collective murmur swept across the auditorium. The moderator stepped forward nervously, sensing tension rising above the event's intended tone. But Kennedy lifted his hand casually, signaling everything was under control. "Ms. Meyer," he said, "I'm all for accountability. I've never shied from answering a tough question. But before we go forward, I'd like to ask you something." She nodded, somewhat guarded. "You say leaders influence people, and I agree. So would you also say," he continued carefully, "that spiritual leaders have an even greater responsibility? That they ought to be transparent about their own choices, especially when they're leading millions?" Joyce hesitated. The question was legitimate but laced with a discreet challenge. "Yes," she replied. Absolutely. Spiritual leaders must be true examples. Kennedy nodded. Then let's talk about that, he said. The audience collectively inhaled. Joyce stiffened. Kennedy continued, his tone gentle, not accusatory, just piercingly honest. Ms. Meyer, you've taught for years about humility, simplicity, stewardship. But your critics, not mine, have pointed out that you've lived in ways that seem inconsistent with those teachings. Expensive homes, jets, lavish things. Now, I'm not here to judge your lifestyle. I don't know your heart. But the people who criticize you, they're not quiet. And they do deserve an answer. Joyce's expression softened with visible frustration. She hadn't expected him to bring this up, at least not so boldly or so soon. I've addressed those claims before, she said, steadying her voice. People misunderstand the reality of large ministries, the costs, the responsibilities, the transparency we maintain. They focus on numbers, not impact. Kennedy nodded slowly. Fair enough, he said. But sometimes truth gets buried under explanations. People don't want explanations, they want clarity. So why not answer simply? Why not say, yes, I have these things, and here's exactly why. And here's how I hold myself accountable. That would silence critics faster than any press statement. The room erupted in quiet applause, small but noticeable. Joyce inhaled sharply. She wasn't angry. She was cornered by a truth she hadn't prepared for. She had expected to silence Kennedy's style, but he had gently put her under the same spotlight. I'm not here to defend myself, she finally said. I'm here to talk about truth. Then talk about all of it, Kennedy replied softly. Not just the parts that point toward me. A ripple moved through the audience like wind through wheat. Joyce tried to regain control. Let's not waste time on personal matters, she said. This is bigger than individuals. Kennedy leaned back. Ma'am, accountability always starts with individuals. A wave of applause broke out, stronger this time, echoing against the auditorium walls. Joyce pressed her lips together. She attempted a pivot. We all fall short at times, she said. But spiritual truth doesn't change simply because critics speak loudly. Kennedy nodded. Agreed. But sometimes critics speak loudly because truth wasn't spoken clearly enough from the start. Joyce paused. The lights reflected off her bracelets as she reached for her water, hands slightly unsteady. The crowd sensed it. She was losing control of the direction she had tried so hard to command. The moderator attempted to break the tension with a new topic, but the audience had already locked onto the unfolding showdown, two different worlds colliding over the same word, truth. Joyce reset her posture. Senator Kennedy, she said, I think you misunderstand my intentions. I wasn't questioning your integrity, I was questioning your impact. And I'm not questioning your heart, Kennedy replied, but your consistency. That line, calm, measured, devastating, settled over the hall like smoke. Joyce blinked, stunned. The truth she'd attempted to wield had bounced back at her with more force than anticipated. She had come to challenge, but she was the one being challenged. And she had started it. She exhaled slowly. So what do you suggest then? She asked quietly. What does accountability look like to you? Kennedy leaned forward, voice softening with sincerity. Transparency, he said. Humility. Admitting what's true even when it's uncomfortable. People respect honesty, Ms. Meyer. If you tell them the whole truth, even the messy parts, they can forgive a lot. What they don't forgive is feeling misled. The room stilled. Many nodded. Even some of Joyce's longtime supporters seemed moved by the simplicity of the statement. Joyce looked down at her hands. For the first time, she wasn't battling him, she was contemplating. I appreciate your perspective, she said finally, her voice gentler than before. Perhaps we both have areas where we can be more transparent. A hush fell, an unexpected, profound confession. Kennedy nodded respectfully. We all do. The event shifted from confrontation to dialogue. For the next hour, the two spoke honestly, sometimes sharply, sometimes warmly, about morality, leadership, and the weight of influence. The crowd went from restless to captivated. By the end, the tension that had once threatened to explode had transformed into something almost inspirational, an unexpected moment of mutual accountability. As they left the stage, Joyce approached Kennedy privately. I didn't expect you to confront me like that, she admitted. I didn't expect you to try to silence me, he replied with a smile. Joyce's sternness cracked into a reluctant laugh. Fair enough. He extended a hand. You spoke truth. So did you, she said. Even if it stung. And that, Kennedy said, is how truth sometimes works. When they walked off stage together, side by side, the audience was still buzzing, not with scandal, not with division, but with the rare thrill of witnessing two influential figures challenge each other into honesty. Joyce Meyer had tried to silence John Kennedy, but the truth, unrestrained and unexpected, had backfired in the most revealing way. And oddly enough, it made the night unforgettable.